successful G7 summit. I would say it was one of the most successful. And this meeting couldn't have come at a better time. On Sunday, we reached an agreement with Iran that achieves everything we set out to do, everything and much more. To end the current conflict, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and prevent Iran from ever obtaining a nuclear weapon. That was what this was all about. That was about 99%. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. They cannot develop it, buy it. They can never have a nuclear weapon. At the same time this announcement was made, around that time, as people started to think this was going to happen, when Iran was making some very positive statements, the stock market soared to record highs, gaining thousands of points in a very short period of time. Thousands of points. And oil is dropping like it never has before, considering the levels it has reached in numerical terms. It dropped the 7s, it dropped the 8s. They've never seen anything like this. But if we hadn't made that deal, we could have dropped more bombs for another 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 years. You would never have the horror out in the open. You would never have success. Your market would have, instead of rising to levels that no one has ever seen before, fallen to levels that no one has ever seen before. Maybe except in 1929 or something like that. So, all the tough guys don't realize that this wasn't a 3-month deal. It was being built for years. Do you know why? Because I was the one who ended up killing General Soleimani. If I hadn't killed General Soleimani, we probably wouldn't be talking about this agreement right now. Because he was a mad genius. They were never able to replace him. But a lot of people forget about the tough guys, the tough guys who would drive the country straight into the ground. The last 2 days gave us the chance to discuss the details of this historic agreement with many of our closest friends and allies, including the G7 nations and many presidents and prime ministers. As you saw, Prime Minister Modi was here. We had a long conversation. He's great. They're excited that we've made an agreement, all of them. Not a single nation has come to us and said, please, sir, keep dropping bombs on them. Please keep dropping bombs. Stupid people say that, but I'm very pleased to report. And by the way, these last 2 days have been brutal. The 200 million in bombs. And that also ends up being pretty expensive, by the way, on top of everything else. They knew I would come on the 3rd night. We warned them we would come on the 3rd night. They didn't have a navy. It was sunk. They didn't have their air force. It was gone. Not a single plane. They didn't have anti-aircraft equipment. So we had free rein. They didn't have their leaders, but there's a new group that actually I think is smarter. I think they're very smart. I think they're much less radicalized, and I think they're actually very good. They really love their country, truly. You talk about regime change, nobody says it, but I think that's what it is. Look, their first group of leaders is already gone. Their second group of leaders is also already gone. Some of their third group of leaders is gone too. But for the most part, and honestly, I think that's regime change. I think they're going to act differently. I think they see a different way of life that they had never been exposed to before. The only thing I didn't want to see was an economic catastrophe. If you had kept going with that, it could have happened. But I know that every time we talked about the possibility of peace, the stock market skyrocketed. It never dropped. They didn't like it. People, the stock market is smarter than anyone who exists, including the people on this stage, except for me, of course. Let's see, I don't know. What do you think, Scott? Is the stock market smarter than you? No, sir. That's a terrible statement. All right, the stock market is pretty smart. And every time we said something amazing like we're going to reach an agreement, it went up. And every time we said something negative like, guess what? We're not even going to be able to reach an agreement, it dropped a lot, Peter. Very, very big. It tells you something. And I've studied presidents, some good, some bad, some great. Few are great and some are really, really bad. We've had good ones recently, and the only president I didn't want to be was the late and great Herbert Hoover. I didn't want that. And who knows what would have happened, but bad things happen. So, the last few days have provided an opportunity to discuss the details of the agreement with our closest friends and allies, heads of state. They were all here, many of them, well more than 7, as you know, many of them. And they issued a statement. I think President Macron, who did a great job, by the way, I'm a real fan of him and Brigitte, they did a great job. But they all issued statements saying they love this deal because they want to see this come to an end. And they love the fact that the Strait of Hormuz, don't forget, if we were going to drop bombs, let's say we wanted another month, another 2-3 months, maybe a few weeks. It could be for another 3 months. It could be whatever. What you have left could be nothing, yet you still lack it. The Strait will never be open because the people who have billion-dollar ships that cost $1 billion, they don't like to sail with those ships, nor do they want their ships to take part. When you go up the coast and cross the strait and there are rockets flying over your head, they want to protect their billion-dollar investment. You would be without oil for maybe years. These are stupid people. But no one was tougher than me. No one went after Soleimani. When I took out Soleimani, people thought that was the biggest thing in the Middle East in 50 years. That was the biggest event. He was the head of Iran and was respected, but he was a crazy genius. He was a genius, the father of the roadside bomb. And then when you see young people, and in some cases women, but mostly men, walking around without legs, without arms, with their faces shattered into pieces, that's what Soleimani, 95%, 96.2% say, or something like that. 95% that was Soleimani. He happened to have come from Iran, and I blew him up. Do you remember that? I blew him up in Valley of Death. He got off the plane and we followed him. And to be honest, because they've been wonderful to me, Israel, but they didn't want to do that attack. They were totally ready. The night before the attack, they told me they didn't want to do it. So I had to make a decision. I made the decision to do it, but it was a joint venture. As we say in the real estate business, it was a joint venture between Israel and us. We studied this for months and knew his flight almost a month ahead. He only flew on large commercial planes filled with people, knowing we wouldn't target him. He was smart. But we knew he would be on that plane and we followed him. And then Israel informed me that they wouldn't do it. And I had to make a decision. I had some very good generals, not the ones you see on television, very good ones. And I also want to thank Pete Hegseth and General Raisin Kane, who is incredible. Okay, these guys are amazing. They couldn't be better. But I had good generals, and I said to him, well, if Israel isn't going to do it, we're already ready. We'll do it. Do you want to do it or not? He said, sir, if you want to do this, we can. How? Well, we'll do it just as well or better ourselves. We don't need anyone. So we eliminated Soleimani. One of the greatest events that has ever happened in the Middle East, maybe of all time, but they say 50 years, they say 100 years. The Prime Minister of Pakistan called it possibly the greatest event ever. Islam, no one could believe it. That's when it started. It didn't start 3, 4, or 5 weeks ago. And Obama wouldn't do that. What Obama did was the JCPOA. He loaded a plane with $1.7 billion in cash in green bills coming from banks all over Washington, Maryland, and Virginia. They ran out of money. They couldn't make payroll. All of that was put on a Boeing 757, a wonderful plane. Then they flew it to Iran and distributed it to people, bribed people. They expected to close the deal, but then gave away billions of dollars. And they got a deal that was a pathway to a nuclear weapon. I get so angry, I think I'm allowed to get angry when I watch these things. The Democrats talk about this all the time. We had this deal ready. You had a deal that would legally give them a nuclear weapon. And if that happened, Israel would have been destroyed. And to be fair to Bibi, Netanyahu is a good man. Sometimes he gets a little less enthusiastic, but he's a very good man. We had a great partnership. He has been a great prime minister. We have a small disagreement about Lebanon. I say you could be a little softer, dear. You don't have to bring down a building every time someone enters it. And that's from Hezbollah. It's been an amazing partnership. He'll say we're the big partner and he's the very small partner. And that's true. So he came to the country and begged President Barack Hussein Obama not to go through with the JCPOA. He said it could have been the end of Israel, and it would have been if I hadn't come alone. And Obama didn't listen to him. Bibi actually went to Congress and begged them, but he got nowhere. And they had this terrible deal, which was really terrible for Israel. Really terrible for Israel. And that's how it stayed. And then I showed up and canceled that deal. There was very little time left, you know. It was a short-term deal. You know, with countries you need hundreds of years. You don't need 8 or 9 years. It's not like signing the lease for a candy store on the corner. You need hundreds of years. It was a short-term lease contract. It expired a long time ago. If I hadn't stopped it, it would have expired and you and many others wouldn't be here. Israel and the whole Middle East would have been wiped out. You saw that when everyone was shocked by those missiles. They were aimed at different places. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. Think about that. Bahrain, Kuwait, they were hit. Nobody thought that would even happen. Not even me. I didn't think that was going to happen. They didn't think so either. They were going to wipe out the entire Middle East, including Israel. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they would have used it within moments of getting it. So I made it very difficult for them when I ended Barack Hussein Obama's catastrophe. JCPOA, one of the worst deals. NAFTA might have been worse, but this was worse economically. This deal was very dangerous. It gave them everything, including a lot of money, which, by the way, we don't give. Just in case you have any doubts, we're going to hand this out for you to read and see. And it's a memorandum of understanding. If this isn't completed in 60 days, that's fine. We'll go back to bombing. You know, I don't want to do that because it's so good. But maybe we'll have to do it because we're never going to allow them to have a nuclear weapon. But they agreed not to do that. And you'll see that very clearly in the agreement. So the second phase was that they were building or enriching material, as they say. I call it nuclear dust. They were enriching the material under granite mountains. Granite, for those who are not in the construction business, granite is a very strong stone, the strongest. It's not as beautiful as marble, but it's much more resistant. It's much more resistant, like the new granite I installed on the White House staircase, which goes up to the Oval Office, made of black granite. It's rated for 1 million years or more. No marble is rated like that. Marble is rated for 100 years outdoors. So these are granite mountains. And the B-2S came and hit those ventilation ducts in the dark at 1 in the morning with no moon. They had beams going way up all over the place. Those guys did quite a job. And then they were criticized by certain members of the press, like CNN, for maybe not having caused enough damage. The damage was far worse. The mountains collapsed over everything. No one will recover it anytime soon unless we do it ourselves. We'll get it, but only we can. They say that China has the equipment to get it, and we also have the equipment to get it. It's not very valuable, but we want to recover it for psychological reasons, and no one is touching it. We have cameras. That's the Space Force. We have the best ones. We have, by the way, the largest army in the world. But I'm proud of the Space Force because I was the one who created it. We have Space Force cameras at each of the doors, at all of them. Well, there are no doors. They were pretty much destroyed. But in every area of this, if someone comes in and has a badge with his name on it, like Muhammad something, which is about a 50-50 guess, Muhammad something, they know how to say the name. They can give you the serial number. We see things. You wouldn't believe the quality of what we have. That's why we've been so successful. That's why our blockade will go down in history as something incredible. No one has ever seen a blockade like this. A blockade like this. It's like a wall of steel. So what happened was that we ended that, and I call it nuclear dust, and that was the end of it. But if we hadn't hit that with the B-2 bombers, or if it hadn't worked, they would have a nuclear weapon, a nuclear bomb at a very advanced stage. Not the highest, but still very high. We have much bigger ones, but we hope we'll never have to use them. We have the biggest. Russia has the second. China is much further behind, but they'll eventually catch up. Unfortunately, you know, they're getting there, but we have the biggest. We have the most powerful, but we also have the biggest of all. But Russia isn't that far behind. And then comes China in third, but they will. In 5 years, they'll probably be at the same level. And we should make a denuclearization agreement. It would be so great. We don't need all of this. We don't need to be able to blow up the whole world about 300 times in a row. It's terrible, really. If we could make a denuclearization agreement, I would love it. And one of those two is very willing to do it, I'll tell you. But the other one is less willing, and you need everyone. So the agreement we reached with Iran on Sunday will be signed very soon. Tomorrow, maybe the day after. Thank you. Subject: deals. My whole life revolves around them. All I've ever done is make deals. Deals. And some pretty crazy things happen with deals. I've been in deals where it's practically a sure thing. No way. It can't be signed. And it doesn't end up getting signed. I've been in negotiations where you had no chance of closing. And they happen just like it's nothing. So we'll probably sign the deal. They want to sign the deal. And they've been acting quite appropriately. They suffered 2 pretty big blows last week. They were really very big blows. So the most important thing is that Iran has agreed that it will neither produce nor acquire a nuclear weapon. Not even produce, because originally they stated that they would not develop a nuclear weapon. Some people thought that was fine. These guys quite rightly did not think so. But I didn't like it when some said they wouldn't develop one. I said, what happens if they buy one? I don't know. It's pretty dangerous for someone to sell one, because whoever sells them a nuclear weapon will get nuked too. If they sold a nuclear weapon, only a few could do that. They would be hit by a nuclear attack. They wouldn't keep that country for long. So that's something really dangerous for anyone to do. But I wanted that right there. So it's about developing, getting, buying, acquiring, anything like that. You'll see that in the agreement. It's appropriate to make it public, and we sent a copy to Israel. They have been a very good partner. Again, I think they could do much better regarding Hezbollah. They thought they would never get caught because we never bombed in the morning. But we did bomb. It was 88 people in all, and I'm not proud of that. But the second group came in, and they were also quite unreasonable. And they had already left. We've been dealing with the third group. Some have left this planet, but we've been dealing with them. And again, they've been fine. I mean, I've had much easier situations before. I've had some easier ones. They're tough and smart. Maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has already increased quite substantially, and the normal flow of energy will resume again in the coming days. And trillions of dollars will be earned around the world, and the stock market, I believe, will continue to rise. The only difference is that there is a factor that is very volatile, very tough, very smart, frankly. You know, they have, in a way, a primitive culture, but it's also a brilliant primitive culture. They are very intelligent people, very good negotiators, but so are we. So instead of possibly going into a depression, instead of having Herbert Hoover as my favorite president, I was always the one I didn't want to be at all. I wouldn't have preferred Nixon. I wouldn't have preferred. There are many I wouldn't have preferred, but the one I always thought of, Herbert Hoover. And he caused that. He raised taxes too quickly and raised interest rates too quickly all at the same time, and that caused the Great Depression. So I don't think I'm going to make those mistakes. I lower taxes, not raise them. In fact, we just gave you the biggest tax cut in the history of our country. So we will work in parallel with the Gulf nations to address non-nuclear issues, such as conventional ballistic missiles, which we will talk about and support. I mean, they have to have some because other people have them. You have to have some. Someone said you shouldn't give them to them. I mean, I know people, I like some of them, but I don't think so. I don't think they're smart, sir. You shouldn't let them have any missiles. I said, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to let Saudi Arabia have missiles, but they can't have them. Yes, sir. You can't, it doesn't work that way. You know, it doesn't work that way. And the missiles aren't the problem. The missiles are, they hit a small place, but they don't blow up the planet. So So the Gulf nations will address the non-nuclear issues because we'll be talking about ballistic missiles, and we'll also talk about the terrorist proxies they have, which we don't want to happen. I want to thank our partners in Pakistan and Qatar very much. They work really hard. And they knew him a little in the case of Pakistan. Well, in the case of Qatar, they were kind of at odds. And you know, Qatar was great because it's right next to her. When I flew from there, from that place to Saudi Arabia, I flew for 40 minutes, and I flew to the United Arab Emirates for 40 minutes. Two great leaders there, by the way. In the case of Saudi Arabia, the father is still alive, and he's really fantastic, and the son is going to be great. You're going to be great, right, Crown Prince? Mohammed from the United Arab Emirates is an incredible warrior. He dropped a bomb last week, and I said, who the hell is dropping all these bombs? It was the United Arab Emirates. Mohammed is a good fighter, but for decades, all governments have tried to get Iran to give up its nuclear ambitions, but the threat has only grown. The rhetoric kept getting stronger, and nothing ever happened. And Iran became even stronger and tougher. If we hadn't blown them up the first time and then destroyed those weapons, they would have been unstoppable. That should have done what I'm doing, and what I did should have been done years ago. It would have been much easier, much less firepower. But it wasn't. And again, I want to thank all those countries, Israel and Bibi Netanyahu. So, of course, the breakthrough wouldn't have been possible without the unprecedented pressure that the United States put on the regime over the past year and a half. But once again, this started a long time ago. It started with the death of Soleimani. That was important. No president in history has been tougher on Iran than I have, and they know it. If they don't honor the agreement, or if some parts aren't included, it's just a memorandum of understanding. We have an understanding on some things, even if it's not written down. And if they don't honor it, we'll probably go back to bombing them until they do. You know, it's really amazing what bombs can do. So, here's what I say. Obama's deal was kind of a road that led to a nuclear weapon. And we can say that Trump's deal was like a wall against a nuclear weapon, one that the nuclear weapon couldn't get through. No one is going to get through that. We built a wall. They wouldn't have it, and that's what we have now. And it also says the most important clause for me very clearly. Number one, the Strait opens. But that's much less important than the other clause, the clause number, whatever it is, 5-8. It's a very strong statement that they will never have a nuclear weapon, and it doesn't say that they will have one in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. With Obama, they managed to enrich in a much faster way. This agreement now gives Iran a historic opportunity if they follow the path of cooperation that we have opened for their country. Well, now I have a chance to survive. Think about it, you know. They have 91 million people. People want me to bomb the bridges. Why don't I bomb them? I already have. Because, you know, they went back on a promise, and I bombed their biggest bridge, like the George Washington Bridge. That was basically Iran's George Washington Bridge. But we bombed that bridge. You saw that. Quick strike by the F-22, the most beautiful fighter jet ever made, by the way. Actually, we're ordering a few more. We're bringing it back because it's so efficient. It's incredible. It's amazing. Look, we have the largest army in the world. Those B-2 bombers are incredible. Who would have thought they could do it? Each had two because the flight was so long, but they carried 3 of the biggest and heaviest bombs, hundreds of thousands of pounds, and handled them like it was nothing. It's incredible. And they're also undetectable. They flew to Iran completely. Think about that, completely without being detected. Now Iran is waiting for them. They're waiting for them, and they never saw them. 1 o'clock in the morning, they never saw them. They're stealthy. And we just ordered 22 more. The newer and improved version, which I think is better. I don't know how the hell you get any better, but as I expressed to world leaders here this week, it's my hope that the peace agreement will be the beginning of a much bigger agreement all around.